This is Kathy with Decal Pals on Etsy.com, and today I'm going to be talking about the extravaganza listing in my shop. This listing contains designs for 12 different textured eggs, and each texture comes in two versions, one with a border and one without a border. And specifically today we're going to talk about whether the designs will translate into paper. They're all going to cut out of vinyl just fine, but some of them will also go into paper and cut really well. And when I say paper, I mean paper or cardstock. So I've got the first 6 of the designs here on the mat, and whether you're working in ScanNCut canvas or in some other cutting software, all this applies to what you're going to be doing as far as looking at the designs and deciding how they work. So let's look at the first pair. This is the Polka Dot, and the one in black is the one that doesn't have a border, obviously, and the one in green does have a border around the edge. Now this will cut fine in paper because everywhere that you see black is what you'll have left once you cut this particular file. So that's not going to fall apart. It looks a bit like a piece of Swiss cheese, but when you cut the template out of another color and put it behind the piece that you cut this way, you'll have a nice design. Now with the border on it, you're not going to have any trouble at all. Of course, it just adds a different look. However, when you look at the chevron, it's a little bit different situation, obviously, because if you were to cut this out of paper or cardstock, everything that's black here would be an independent piece of paper, and they would just all fall apart when you took them off the mat. However, in this case, when we add a border, that unifies all the pieces and holds them in place so that you could cut this out of paper or cardstock. Now be aware that right here where you have these points are not going to be attached to anything. So when you lift up your design from your mat, and as you handle the design, you want to be careful that you don't bend it out of shape or let those points get bent or damaged in any way. The stripes is the same thing. It's going to work like the chevrons did. You can cut it out of paper with the border. Now this one is a little different in that you could not cut this, obviously. You couldn't cut it out of paper because they're loose. Again, these pieces are not welded together anyway, and while the border does weld them all together and they're not going to actually fall apart, you do want to be aware again that everywhere that you see this black here, and these points here, those are not going to be attached to anything other than at the very base of the little part of the design. So again, you just want to handle them with care as you're lifting them off the mat and putting them down. Again, this piece is loose here. You'd lose it if you were to cut it out of paper, but the border helps keep it all together, and likewise on this last one. Here are 4 more of the designs, and these would not cut in any case very well out of paper or cardstock because there are pieces of the design in each case that are sort of floating out there and aren't really attached. These aren't attached well enough to really hold, even though the outside would be welded with the border. And while this one right here, when you do it with a border, only this middle piece here is loose, so you might want to manually place that if you just had to have that design in paper, but otherwise it's just not going to work in paper whether it has the border or not. Now on these last 2, this one here would not work without the border around it, but even with the border you still want to be aware that you're going to have a point right here that's unattached to anything around it, so you want to handle it carefully. And on this one, I would say that since these lines are so fine, if you cut them out of paper, of course this one would have just oodles of loose ends here that wouldn't be attached to anything, which could be problematic. But as well, it's a very thin cut line on this design, so you might want to make sure that if you do use cardstock or paper that you don't use it too small, because these lines might be hard to keep together and deal with if it's out of paper. So I hope this video helped you learn a few things about looking at designs and trying to decide whether they will work in paper. And this is Kathy with Decal Pals on Etsy.com. Keep cutting and stay happy.